The Evergreen Chapter is Washington's only chapter of the American Society for Public Administration. Our chapter was established in 1983, and currently we have over 90 members who are students, academics, and practitioners. Our members are just starting their careers, in the middle, and those who have retired from a lifetime of service. As a chapter member, you're also part of the national organization, which is the largest and most prominently broadly based professional association in American public administration. You are part of a diverse membership of approximately 8,000 members across the United States. It is now my great honor to welcome Alan Rosenbaum, the current president of ASPA. Alan Rosenbaum is professor of public administration and director of the Institute for Public Management and Community Service and the Center for Democracy and Good Governance at Florida International University in Miami. He went to FIU as dean of its School of Public Affairs and Services. He is also a recent past president of ASPA and has served 2 terms as president of the International Association of Schools and Institutes of Administration in Brussels, Belgium. Based on nomination by the Secretary General of the United Nations, vetting with the US mission, and approval by UN Economic and Social Council, he is a member of the United Nations Committee of Experts on Public Administration, where he serves as vice chairperson. He has served as acting budget administrator of the city of Miami and subsequently worked in state government in Illinois and on educational policy in the national government. Alan has directed large USAID democratic institution building projects in Latin America and Africa, and has carried out numerous international projects for the United Nations, the World Bank, the Swedish International Development Agency, and various governments around the world. He's provided technical assistance to governments and lectured or conducted research in approximately 100 countries around the world. He's been visiting distinguished professor at the University of Potsdam, Germany, and is honorary professor at the Chinese Academy of Governance in Beijing, as well as at Babs Bolyai University in Cluj, Romania. He currently serves on the journal editorial boards of 11 journals located in 8 countries around the world and is a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. Prior to going to FIU, he was on the faculties of the Universities of Maryland, Connecticut, and Wisconsin-Madison, and held a research position at the University of Chicago. We are so honored to have Alan as our distinguished guest and president of ASPA. So please, let's welcome Alan.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I'm going to have to tell my office to send a shorter bio in the future. And that's very lovely, but unneeded to mention all of that. But it is a real honor and a pleasure to be here with what has really, for as long as I've known ASPA well, which is about 30 years, been highly regarded as one of ASPA's 3 or 4 most outstanding chapters in the country. And it is a real pleasure to be here representing National ASPA and also to bring greetings to Nicole, Mary, to the whole chapter from the National Council of ASPA and from ASPA's staff, Bill Shields and our excellent staff, and to encourage all of you to engage to the extent possible with National ASPA. There are many activities that National ASPA puts on in terms of webinars and things of that type, but also please reach out as individuals, either to National Council members, the staff, or myself. It's particularly, and also let me say a hello to your National Council member from this region, J. Paul Blake, who has helped and guided me over the years in terms of understanding and involvement, engagement with National ASPA. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here to talk briefly in terms of Public Service Week and the honoring of our many, many outstanding public servants, and more significantly to simply note the critical importance that government plays in our lives. It's interesting, the events that have taken place during the course of the past couple of years with the pandemic, and the fact that we are depending so much on our government employees, our public servants, in terms of making it through this era. You know, it's very interesting in that regard. For really much of the last 4 decades, people have been talking about small government, the need to keep taxes low, the need to deregulate, and the like. This contrasts very much with the 4 decades that preceded the last 4 decades, the period from the 1930s and to the 1970s, when we had fairly high taxes, indeed just about the highest taxes in the history of the country, the greatest amount of regulation, a great deal of government intervention. So what have we seen in contrasting these two periods of roughly the same period of time, 40 years? Well, in the course of the last 4 decades, when we have emphasized keeping government out of our lives, minimizing government, we have seen pretty much the greatest growth in inequality in the history of this country. It goes back, the degree of inequality we've seen in the past 4 decades compares favorably with the period from the 1880s to the 1920s, which up till that time was the greatest degree of inequality growth in the history of the country. We've also seen stagnation of the middle class. If you look at all of the data on middle class income and the like, we have seen stagnation of our middle class and decline, actual decline in the middle class. Contrast that with the 4 decades before, when we had the greatest economic growth, the most dynamic economy in the history of the country, when we had substantial government regulation, but great decline in inequality. We had, tremendous growth in national infrastructure and capacity. So I think if there is any lesson to take away from the pandemic, it is how important government is, and good government and public servants are, to the well-being of our country and our economy. We've seen this past year. Actually, we saw it at the terrible time of 9/11, when we relied very heavily on government. The reality is we rely heavily on government and public servants in times of crisis, but what history really shows us is that when we rely heavily on government and public servants, all of us do better. The country does better, the economy does better, and we become the kind of country that we can all be very proud of. So it is a great honor for me, and I thank you so much for having me here to join with you in celebrating our extraordinary public servants and their extraordinary commitment to making this the kind of country it's been and making it an even better country. So thanks again so much.
Thank you very much, Alan. I think your words have definitely resonated with me, and hopefully they will resonate with everyone else here on the webinar as well. I would now like to introduce Mary Van Verst, who will, she's our chapter secretary and co-chair of this event. And so she will move our program along.
Thank you, Nicole. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure for me to be able to introduce my friend, J. Paul Blake. He is the retired Director of Media and External Relations at the Daniel J. Evans School of Public Policy and Governance at the University of Washington. He is serving his 5th term on ASPA's National Council. His professional service includes 3 terms as president of ASPA's Evergreen Chapter. In 2013, the Evergreen Chapter awarded J. Paul a Lifetime of Public Service Award. He is a member of ASPA's Endowment Board. He chaired the Financial Management Committee and has served on the Governance Committee, the Ethics Committee, which revised the Society's Code of Ethics, and the Ethics and Standards Implementation Committee. J. Paul is a recipient of the Donald C. Stone Service to ASPA Award in 2016. He received a Chester Newland Presidential Citation of Merit Award at the 2017, 2018, and 2019 annual conferences. As a member of ASPA delegations, he has presented papers in Japan and South Korea. He is a former member of the Advisory Board for the University of Washington Public Relations and Strategic Communications Certificate Program. His past memberships include the International Association for Public Participation, the National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation, the Seattle Association of Black Journalists, the Black Heritage Society of Washington State, Tabor 100, and Blacks in Government. J. Paul, I welcome you, my friend, to the stage to introduce our keynote speaker, Terryl Ross.
Well, thank you, Mary, and thanks for those very kind words. And I want to say hello to Alan again, specifically, and thank him for his participation in our program today and for his kind comments. Hello to each and every member of our virtual audience. As your district representative to ASPA's National Council and former chapter president, and as Mary said, I'm heartened that you've taken time today to participate in this program in celebration of National Public Service Recognition Week and our award recipients. I'm proud to say I include Terryl Ross among my very best friends, including fellow Evergreen chapter members involved in this program. Last year, the chapter supported my nomination of Terryl to receive the Gloria Hobson Norden Social Equity Award. The award recognizes lifetime achievement and effort in the cause of social equity. Candidates may be employees of state, local, or federal government, the nonprofit sector, or employees of a college and university. Elected public officials are also eligible for the award. Terryl received the award during this year's highly successful virtual conference. His speech during the conference was memorable and praised. Terryl is the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the University of Washington's College of the Environment and has more than 30 years of experience related to equity and social justice. He specializes in examining the intersectionality of race, changing demographics, emerging trends, higher education, and new media. He was the founder and director of Mosaic Nation, the director of Community and Diversity at Oregon State University, the regional affairs manager at the Greater Seattle Chamber of Commerce, and AmeriCorps director and a military intelligence officer for the U.S. Army. He has also been a DJ, a filmmaker, a football coach, and student activist. Terryl has been awarded the Newcomer of the Year by the Seattle chapter of the Public Relations Society of America, Volunteer of the Year by the UW Alumni Association, and the UW Distinguished Alumni Award. He has been featured in the Seattle Times for his commitment to social justice. He is a senior fellow of the Oregon American Leadership Forum, class of 21. Terryl believes people are ready to come together in a new way to build learning communities and proactively make social justice a reality in America. Terryl is in the process of completing his first book, The Rise of the Others and the Quest for Power. He received his MA from Syracuse University and completed his PhD in Educational and Communications Technology at the University of Washington. Terryl, we look forward to your comments today.
Thank you so much, J. Paul, for that. And I want to do my screen share here. One second. So once again, thank you so much. And I just want to say that I've known Paul for over 30 years, and we're friends. And we've actually worked more in the last year than we did all those other years. So it's very exciting to actually be working with you. And one of the things I admire about you the most, since we're going to be talking about leadership today, is that when there's something that you don't like or you don't agree with, you actually write people and try to have dialogues with people, either in the media and in other circumstances. So I really admire that about you. So we don't have a whole bunch of time today. And before I get into my presentation, I also want to thank Mary for inviting me to be here and celebrating Public Service Week with all of you. So in the short time we have, I'm basically going to talk about DEI and then leadership, and then have some time for discussion with questions and answers. So I put together this chart some time ago, and I just want to go over it with you because it really, I've been lucky enough to be part of this field before it was a field. And I should say that I was born in 1959, and so I am now 61 years old, lived in 8 decades. And but as a younger person, most of my life at the beginning, there was a status quo. And the analogy that I like to use is who gets to sit at the table where the decisions get made. And so what I would say is that when I grew up, very rarely did I see anyone that looked like me sitting at the tables of power wherever I've been. And then something kind of cool happened in the 70s and 80s that we started kind of thinking a little bit about this thing called multiculturalism. And as you can see, at the beginning of this movement, it was really kind of focused on people of color and women. And then if you move a little forward until the 90s and the beginning of this century, that's when we started calling it diversity. We started coming up with theories of practice, all these different ways of thinking, and started having more dialogues. And cultural competency was a big deal. And then equity really started to get traction. Before that, it was always about equality, but then we moved into equity. We made some legislation to deal with to help us better support people with disabilities. And a little bit, but not too much, we started talking about class. Most of the organizations in our, at least in our business sector, in the 70s, they had chief executive officers. In the 90s, they had chief information officers. And then recently now we have chief diversity officers. In fact, the University of Washington, they no longer call that person chief diversity officer. They call it a university diversity officer because some Native American communities did not feel good about us using that word the way that we were using it. But what I think is important is that we're entering a new time with this whole thing that has now become known as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my premise, for those of you who were able to hear the speech I did last month, is that this is the beginning of probably what's going to be the most contentious period of all of these times that we're talking about. And my premise is that sometime you are going to you're going to see that it's actually, we're kind of entering a cultural war. And what I'm asking you to do is I want you to consider joining the inclusion side of this war, because the stuff that we're talking about, it's not about Democrat or Republican. I actually think it's about who are we going to include and who are we going to exclude. And I think that what you're starting to see and hear are people who want to be included in the problem solving. And so, and I hope that that once you realize that we really are in this kind of cultural war, I hope that you choose the side of inclusion. So when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity is simply who gets to sit at the table. And there's all types of people and there's all types of identity that are present at any given time. And a lot of times with diversity, you can, like whenever I go to meetings or wherever I go places, I just look around to see what type of diversity I can tell. Now there's always diversity that we can't tell as well. So, but diversity is kind of tangible in that way. And something that's really interesting is because I'm a demographer, is that next week, I believe next week, the census data is going to come out. And I'm really excited about that. And maybe in the question and answer, I can give you some of the things that I predict is going to happen. But that's what diversity is. Now, equity is interesting because most of my life it was equality, and then we recently shifted to equity. And equity means that it's a change agenda, and it's more of a correction agenda. Equity means that for short term, we're actually going to help some people over others. And so what someone like me does is I work with people to understand that, and we have people on, you know, all different sides of the continuum about that. Some people like that and some people don't, and that's fair. But the whole idea about equity is that sometimes in the short term, you might have to help some people over others. And I'm come from a family that my birth family had 2 sets of twins, and we can tell you all about fairness and equity. And so part of my job is to help people to understand that for short term, you might have to be unfair to some people. And the big change is inclusion. And inclusion, and one of the things we've done successfully in the last 20 years is we have all types of diversity at the table. But the difference is that it's not always included. Inclusion is much more difficult because inclusion means that people at the table have power and hopefully equal power with everyone else at the table. And a lot of the corporations that are taking place in our society, a lot of the changes that are going on in this political realm that we're dealing with, a lot of the employees in some corporations are demanding that their companies go in one direction or the other. And so that's kind of going behind the scenes. And I suspect that you're going to start seeing more of that in government agencies. Okay, so here's a real simple idea. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we wanted to have a vision here. Let me, and that a 21st century organization leads with diversity and inclusion. Everyone feels welcome and included. You accomplish your mission, and you are a destination of choice for the region's best talent. That sounds simple enough. I don't consider that to be very threatening or anything like that. But what I can tell you from my lived experience is that not everyone buys into that. So my experience has been that you are likely to see 5 levels of people in any organization that you encounter. And we might even have those 5 levels on this Zoom call today. And on one extreme, you have people who are hostile to that vision that I just shared. They don't support it. They don't want it to happen. And they actively work against it. And let me tell you, as a diversity director, that's true. And I wish you all could be a diversity director for at least a day. And I think if you were, then you'd believe that statement, maybe more than you do now. And then the next level to me are people who visit. They visit that idea of that workplace that I talked about. But at the end of the day, they might come to an event or two, but they're not really going to do much to be part of the change. The third level, now you're starting to get into people that believe in that vision and are committed to it. They don't always know what to do, and I call this level citizens, but they may, this organization may have a plan, they may have a diversity committee, they might have special interest groups, and so there's organizations that are at that place, and then there's people that are at that place. But citizens, once you see citizens, that's where you're going to start seeing the change that takes place. And then diplomats are culturally competent people. They understand the importance of diversity and actually have some skills to be part of the change. And then the last group that I talk about are ambassadors. And ambassadors are very interesting because you almost never see them because they're spending their time building connections with the other people, either in their organizations or with people from other organizations. And so let me tell you, probably the most important thing I learned is when I went to Oregon State University and was in charge of diversity for the campus. That was about 15 years ago now. And my goal was to make everybody at Oregon State University an ambassador by the time that I left. Well, as you know, that probably didn't work, okay? And because I didn't really understand this model at that time. And so what I think is more realistic as we go forward in the 21st century is that let's try to meet everybody where they're at and try to get them to move one step up on this ladder. And I think if you do it right, it probably will take 2 years to do it right. But then that's where the transformation is going to occur. And so to get each person to move on those different levels takes a certain amount of work, but it can be done. It has been done. And I've been lucky enough to be part of some places that have done that. Okay. And so now I want to say a little bit about leadership. And it's my favorite thing about leadership is I always think about John F. Kennedy. And I don't know if you know this, but he gave this big speech at Rice University in 1962. And he said, we choose to go to the moon and we will get to the moon by the end of the decade. And most people know that. But what people don't know is like a year later, all the scientists came back to him and said, hey, Mr. President, did you mean the end of this decade? And he goes, yes. And they said, you know what, we can't do that. Like, what are you thinking? And blah, blah, blah. And what he said was, at the time, it probably wasn't very popular, but he basically said, you know what? I've given you all the things that you've asked for. You have the best equipment. You have the best people in the world to do this. And I believe in you. And we will get to the moon by the end of the decade. And so I think that that was amazing leadership. And we invested all of this money into infrastructure. We invested all of this money into what we now call STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And now it's one of the leading field growth job areas in our country. So that's one of my favorite examples of leadership. And so what I will say here very quickly is that government, when it comes to DE&I, has always actually been on the forefront of leadership. And I don't know whether you know this, but I showed you earlier that slide that talked about affirmative action. Affirmative action was a game changer. The GI Bill was a game changer. And but affirmative action started in the government. And what the government said is, well, if because they weren't giving contracts to everyone equally, they were giving it to some races and not other races. And the government basically said, hey, if everybody's putting in taxes to the government, then the contracts that we give need to go out to everybody as well. And so they looked at themselves and realized that they were not being equitable, and it came up with affirmative action. It didn't last very long, but they came up with it. The other thing that I think is important is organizational diversity. And if you buy my premise that we are entering a cultural war, what I will tell you is that organizations are going to be at the epicenter of change. And there's going to be some that actually are not going to embrace this and are going to struggle internally. And there's going to be others that embrace diversity and I think are actually going to ascend. Because remember, one of the great things about diversity is that you get a lot more innovation when you have a lot of different ways of looking at the world as part of that. I think that if I could give any advice to those of you that are working in government agencies, is that up until now, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we always skew more to the people who don't really want to do this and who don't really want to get involved. And what I would ask you to do and actually to think about is going forward, why don't you actually skew more to the people who believe in this and who want to do it? We can come back and work with the other people later because we do believe in inclusion, but we're going to get more done if we work with the people who already buy in and want to do the work, because we can't do everything in diversity, equity, and inclusion. The other thing in our organizations is that we're going to have to lead with courage. And the third thing is to find your champions. In fact, so something that I'm really excited about is when I gave my speech, I met Jim Norton a few weeks earlier. We had a wonderful telephone call when neither one of us wanted to hang up. And then at ASPA, after he introduced me, I told him that I was going to have an idea that I wanted to share with ASPA, and I didn't tell him much about it. And then but I said that I was going to donate some money. And then he said, well, you should actually make it something that you're going to ask for matching. And so I said, okay. So I volunteered to donate $5,000 towards a social equity campaign. And to my surprise, he actually matched my 5,000. And during that call, while we were on that Zoom call for the award, I think we had several people who chimed in and said that they would give money. So I believe we already have raised, at least through commitments, about $15,000. And that money that we're going to use, that we're going to get, and hopefully some more, we actually want to give that back out to different chapters like the Evergreen chapter, so that if you want to do some things, we want to come up with some ideas. And if you want to, you could submit for these seed grants and actually help you to look at aspects of diversity that are meaningful to you. A lot of people don't know this, but I actually, we want to do this in the name and honor of H. George Frederickson, who was my president, my university president, when I was an undergraduate student at Eastern Washington University. And so I got to meet him. He actually wrote me a letter to get into Syracuse. And not only did I get into Syracuse, but I actually got a full ride scholarship. So really love that man. And I was hoping to meet him at the conference, but because it was virtual, and he passed away, I should say as well. He passed away in July. And so in honor of him, we want to do this 2-year campaign. So I think what I'll do now is I want to read my favorite poem. And I read this at that, and I want to read it now because it really is about leadership, and it's also about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I can tell you before I read it is that everybody that you're about to hear about, they each had a legitimate reason to do or not do what they decided. And so my hope is that when you are in these situations, that you will be the one that has leadership that leads to change. It's called The Cold Within. 6 humans trapped by happenstance in bleak and bitter cold. Each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the story's told. Their dying fire in need of logs. The first man held his back. For of the faces around the fire, he noticed that one was black. The next man, looking across the way, saw not one from his church and couldn't bring himself to give the fire his stick of birch. The third man sat in tattered clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. Why should his log be put to use? To warm the idle rich. The rich man just sat back and thought of the wealth he had in store and how to keep what he had earned from the lazy, shiftless poor. The black man's face bespoke revenge as the fire passed from his sight. For all he saw in his stick of wood was a chance to spite the white. The last man of this forlorn group did not accept for gain. Giving only to those who gave was how he played the game. Their logs held tight in death's still hands was proof of human sin. They didn't die from the cold without. They died from the cold within. So when you get tested, and we are all going to be tested with diversity, equity, and inclusion, please find a reason to be the one that leads and puts your stick into the fire of change. And I conclude by thanking you again for having me, and just congratulating all of you who are going to get some awards today. I'm really excited to be here and to hear you get your awards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ross. I think there's a lot for us to think about there with your words and your presentation and the poem. And I just wanted to throw it out to the group if there are any questions for Dr. Ross. Please either raise your hand and we'll turn your video and audio on, or in the chat function.
I have a question, Terrell.
Yeah.
So you mentioned demographics and the census, and I think you know that I've had an interest in demographics for years. Yeah. We used to talk about that, not so much lately. But anyway, with all the controversy surrounding the census this past year, not to mention the pandemic, how much faith do you have in whatever will be presented as the numbers in the census, which are so important, especially in the public realm with vote, representation and whatnot?
Well, I'm not sure, because I've heard different levels of challenges about the census. It was cut off short, and it was cut off short on purpose. And a lot of people are, we're looking at ways to get more apportionment. And for all of you who don't know this, that they use the census data to determine a lot of community services and stuff like that. And we also know that a lot of people from what the census calls Hispanic population did not feel safe in filling it out. So I think there probably is going to need to be a commission that's going to look at how that census was done. But at the beginning, we're going to have to use that data, whatever it is. So sorry, I don't have a better answer. I see Chuck Wallace has his hand up.
Yeah, Dr. Ross, there are times when we watch the changes in the world occur and in our local communities, but there are times when I get incensed that it just appears that there's a deliberate action to prevent it from occurring. I try to figure out, how do I keep going? Sometimes I just say, it's almost time to give up, but I keep trying. I just want to know, what do you use within yourself to continue to go on and move forward and try to get other people to join along?
Well, I always remember where I came from, and I believe that diversity is, to me, it's going to determine our future. We either are going to be inclusive or we're not. It's very simple. And so, and I choose, just like the president, I choose to put my energy in community building and inclusion. And I've done it my whole life. I've been on stages where we won awards as a group of people, where we made these hard decisions. It's not easy. When you commit to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not easy, but it is the most rewarding work that you'll ever be part of. And so what I would say is, I would look at your inner circles of people, and I would start with the people in your inner circles, and find there's champions in your inner circles. There's champions in your organizations, and start with them. Like I said, we spend too much time skewing to the people who don't want to see stuff. And I said this in my speech on a national thing at the conference, and that is that there are a lot of people that they want to keep their way of life. They don't want to share. They don't want people included. They don't want people voting. And those people that are, that think that way, they don't have to win. They can tie to win, because if it's a tie, then things are going to stay the same. And so it behooves us who are part of this to be part of the change. And so the final thing I'll say, Chuck, to that wonderful question of yours, is I'll say, it's a theory that I call bloom where you're planted. There's somewhere in your life with your circles of people that you can go very deep and make a tremendous impact. It doesn't always have to be at your workplace. You know, it could also be in your volunteer life. So thank you for that wonderful question. I see Steve Benowitz has a question.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I thought it was very enlightening and certainly very timely. What is your thought? What are your thoughts, or what's your reaction to what I think anyway has been the re-rising, if you will, of groups and individuals who are racist or who are concerned about that the scientific information around COVID is, you know, the big lie story about the election and the COVID story. Is there, how would you approach, or how do you approach dealing with that kind of organization, that kind of person, to try to get them on your chart?
Yeah, so you know, that's a great question. And so what I would say is that those people have always been here. I've dealt with them my whole life. They've always been here, and they're not new to me. And for those of us that do this work, I've been attacked physically. I've been attacked, you know, in public media, and that just goes along with the work. But and so I think what makes this different, and for me, I had an aha moment after we had the previous election, and when people went outside with their tiki torches and did a march in South Carolina, because what they did something that was profound, is that they weren't wearing masks. You see, my whole life, whenever I've run up against white supremacists and racists, they're always wearing masks. Now, let me say something too, that not all, you know, when people think of racists, they always think of white people. Well, you know what? There's a lot of people of color that are racist as well. There are a lot of people of color that are bigots as well. So that's part of our human nature. And so, as I was saying earlier, it's here. It's gonna be here. But I think that my optimism comes from for people like you, and the people who chose to be here today, and the people who were part of ASPA. And I think that what I call for is solidarity, because one of the things that does work with some of these people, it doesn't work right away. It just takes time. But most of these people have children or families, and they may not care about this topic, but let me tell you, their children will. And I think that I think that there's places to find solidarity, and we just have to look for it and find it, and not be so swayed by the negative. The final thing I'll say is that diversity, equity, and inclusion, it needs to have somewhere to go to. We've been spending so much of our time talking about where we're coming from, and we need to have a vision of what we want. And so in your organization or in ASPA, you know, we're going to give money to each chapter. And so the Evergreen chapter is going to get some free money to do DEI work. I want you to pick, what do you want that money to be about, and where you want to go. So I think that some of those things are going to make a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think we could spend the rest of the day talking with you. There's just so much to unpack there. And I just want to thank you again for your wonderful talk, and so glad you could join us today.
Thank you.
We will now move into our awards ceremony portion of the event. And I am pleased to introduce Maureen Maples and Mary Van Verst, our event co-chairs, to facilitate the presentations of the award.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I have the pleasure of announcing our first award, which is the Outstanding Graduate Student in Public Administration Award. This is an award that the Evergreen chapter offers to recognize a student who is pursuing or has just completed a degree in public administration or a related field in a master's or doctoral level graduate student program in a fully accredited college or university. The award winner is selected based on nominations submitted on the student's behalf. We ask that nominators have an intimate knowledge of the student's achievements and commitment to the field of public administration. The chapter accepts letters of nomination from a faculty member, program administrator, or a student colleague. This year's Outstanding Graduate Student in Public Administration Award is being given to Shayla Miles. Here to introduce Shayla is her student colleague, Joshua Fike. Joshua is an MPA graduate student at the Evergreen State College. He is a policy intern at a legal clinic in Tacoma and volunteers at various LGBTQ organizations and political groups in the Puget Sound region. Welcome, Joshua.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to nominate Shayla for the Outstanding Graduate Student Award. We go to Evergreen, and it's a unique academic environment where we don't get letter grades. Instead, our professors write long narratives about our progress. It becomes apparent pretty quickly who's pushing themselves to grow. No one in my classes pushed themselves harder than Shayla. She brought her whole self to every assignment and class discussion. When we had presentations to the class, her presentations always stood out among the most well thought out and executed, and it pushed me to challenge myself more. I would see something she made and I would think, I could have done that. Why didn't I try harder? And I know it's not a competition, but Shayla has a way of raising the bar just by being in the room. And I'm excited for Shayla to win this award and look forward to see what's next in our lives as we approach life after graduation.
Thank you. Yeah, first off, I'm extremely honored to have been nominated for this award by my Evergreen colleague, Joshua, who I think is an exemplary student himself. So thank you so much, Joshua. This means a lot to me. I'd also like to thank the amazing teaching team at Evergreen Tacoma. And I want to thank my husband, Jeremiah, as without his support, I could not have realized this very long time goal of mine to get my MPA. My time at Evergreen Tacoma's MPA program has really greatly impressed upon me the importance of the public part in public administration. So I really believe at the end of the day, good public administration is only good insofar as it helps the people it's meant to serve. And to me, this means more representation in the public administration and nonprofit sectors. We need to better represent those we serve, reflecting the great diversity in our communities. I think public administration also needs to serve equitably, understanding the past and investing in those communities and peoples that have been long left out. Finally, to best serve the public, we need to engage the public as public administrators. My studies have really demonstrated the need for public administrators to find better ways to engage with people, communicate with them, and crucially to include them in planning the policies and programs that impact their daily lives. So we have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of work to do. Evergreen Tacoma's MPA program calls for us students to be the change. My learning throughout this program, my teaching team, and especially my fellow Evergreen cohort members have really inspired and prepared me to be that change. And I'm very excited to get out there and get to work. Thank you.
Wonderful, congratulations. I think you would hear a round of applause if we could have that in-person award. You will be getting the award. We'll send it to you, so we will keep in touch, and congratulations. Maureen will now move on to our next award.
Hi, yes, congratulations again, Shayla. And I'm reading about the Billy Frank Jr. Award for Race and Social Justice. So I'm honored to read about the award, and this award honors the life and legacy of Billy Frank Jr., March 9th, 1931 to May 5th, 2014, whose dedication and leadership has forever changed the relationship between Native tribes, tribal governments, state governments, and the federal government. Billy Frank Jr. was a leader in the movement to ensure that treaties between Native tribes, tribal governments, the federal government, and the state of Washington were upheld. His work, which led to a strong U.S. Supreme Court ruling upholding these treaty rights, established 19th century treaties, preserved a cornerstone of tribal culture, This award honors the work and legacy of Billy Frank Jr. to promote race and social justice issues that have had a lasting impact on a national basis. Nominees can be from any sector of the public service who have demonstrated a lasting commitment to the principles of race and social justice. Nominations should include specific information about the nominee's contributions, especially relating to the changes brought by the nominee's efforts and the impact those social changes have had for those served by these undertakings. And then I would like to introduce at this time my colleague and fellow ASPA Evergreen Chapter member, Ben Brunges. And Ben's been an ASPA member since April of 2015. He transferred his chapter affiliation to the Evergreen Chapter from Georgia, where he completed his PhD in public administration at the University of Georgia. Ben is currently an assistant professor at the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance, teaching graduate courses in public policy. In addition to his membership in ASPA, he belongs to the Association for Public Policy and Management, the International Association of Emergency Managers, and the International Public Management Network. Ben is seeking an additional term on the board. He writes, "I'm interested in serving on the Evergreen Chapter's board to help the organization as it seeks to engage practitioners, students, and academics in Washington in an ongoing dialogue over how to improve public management and policy." So thanks so much for being here, everyone, and thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Maureen. I'm very pleased to introduce our award winner for the Billy Frank Jr. Award. Rosie Raimondo Chirunsep has dedicated her career to advancing the interests of people that our institutions have ignored, mistreated, and maybe even abused. As a teacher and higher education administrator, Rosie has worked to make a lasting impact on issues of race and social justice in the tradition of Billy Frank Jr. The first woman of color to serve as the president of South Seattle College, Dr. Rosie Raimondo Chirunsep has demonstrated a commitment to giving voice to and mentoring students of color in higher education. She's established and implemented a strategy to make South Seattle College the first explicitly anti-racist community college in the state and eliminate achievement gaps based on race. In a recent editorial in the Seattle Times, Dr. Raimondo Chirunsep argues that Seattle's Black and brown young people need our city, and our city needs them in every role, all the way to the C-suite. But to make that happen, we have to invest, building on starts like Seattle Promise. The widely heard phrase, inclusive prosperity, means that all of our city's citizens take part in the region's economic success. We share in the hope that we can achieve this, but reaching it will take a new level of community investment in those intended for inclusion. Rosie has dedicated her career to making community colleges and higher education more broadly inclusive, and a place where Black, brown, and Indigenous students are welcomed and can be successful. To do this, Dr. Raimondo Chirunsep is active in broader higher education circles, promoting the importance of community colleges for the advancement of students of colors with presidents at four-year universities in Washington and around the United States. She currently serves on Seattle University College of Education's Advisory Board for Student Development, and nationally is well known for her advocacy and leadership at national associations. In a recent speech to the South Seattle Community College community, Dr. Raimondo Chirunsep noted that we must confront institutionalized racism and work together to create racial equity. In so doing, we will be better able to address the many other forms of inequities that exist. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Being willing is not enough. We must do. We must do. This is Rosie's true strength. She is about action. Where some talk, debate, or discuss, Rosie has put her commitments into action. It shows in the way she leads South Seattle College, in how she works tirelessly in Seattle and Washington, and in the ways that she motivates the people around her. Dr. Raimondo Chirunsep is a respected, action-oriented leader who is doing the hard work of addressing systemic disparities to make education inclusive and equitable. For her established track record of excellence and continued commitment to altering systems of power, it's my honor to introduce Dr. Rosie Raimondo Chirunsep as the 2021 winner of ASPA Evergreen's Billy Frank Jr. Race and Social Justice Award.
Thanks, Ben. That is incredibly humbling to hear what you shared about me. And I'm so excited and just, again, humbled to be honored today alongside the others and to hear Dr. Terryl Ross speak. I think many years ago, Dr. Ross, I had signed up for the Mosaic listserv. And I was early in my career working in education. And even though I wasn't in roles that worked in multiculturalism or diversity, or whatever the terms were that we were using at the time, it was always a lifeline to me in whatever roles I was working in education, to the work that I really, really wanted to do and tried to bring into the different roles that I played. So I'm incredibly honored to hear you speak today after basically staying on that listserv for probably decades now. And so I am also really honored to receive an award in the name of an Indigenous leader. And so in the spirit of that, I just want to acknowledge that I was born on the lands of the Waccamaw and the Cusco peoples of South Carolina. I grew up near the lands of the Suquamish people of Kitsap County. I teach, have done my life's career work on the lands of the Duwamish in the South Seattle area, and I live now on the lands of the Stillaguamish and Suquamish and the Coast Salish peoples here in the Pacific Northwest, and just try to honor whenever the opportunity allows where these lands, where I have been able to be on the lands of folks that have cared for it for time immemorial. And as I reflect on what I wanted to share with a group of folks who are passionate about public service and leadership, I was thinking about why I went into a public administration program many years ago. I graduated from the UW-Evans School in, I think it was 2005. And I've worked in education my whole career. At the time that I pursued an MPA, it was when I was deciding whether I wanted to stay in education. And the experience that I had learning alongside folks from different sectors in the nonprofit world, from different sectors in the public service world, it really helped me understand and cement how I wanted to grow my career with a focus on how to change policy. I think because I've always wanted to do work that benefited communities of color, I've inherently wanted to always make change and to change systems. And 20 years ago, when I was starting out or pursuing an MPA degree, I don't think I knew how I was going to be a system changer. I think I knew how I wanted to make individual decisions professionally and personally that would make contributions toward larger efforts. As my career grew in the community college system, I really started to discover more and more how I could be eventually a part of systemic change. And I can say that one of the most fulfilling aspects of my role now, serving as a president, I also serve as the vice chancellor for equity, diversity, and inclusion for the entire Seattle Colleges district. I'm also now in a position where I lead the equity committee for all of the state community and technical college presidents, where we're considering equity policies statewide that we can impact and change in the short term and in the medium term in service of the long-term change efforts that we want. I started to discover more and more the ways that I could connect my work to systems. And I think I started out really wanting to focus on the people that I wanted to serve most. At the time that I was pursuing an MPA, it would have been students of color in high school, really helping them pursue higher ed when they were perhaps going to be the first generations in their families to do that. And I thought about my unit of change at the student and at the family level. And as my career has grown, and I think as many of the colleagues that you've heard from and other leaders that you've heard from today so far, and that you work with and connect with in your lives of working in public service in various sectors, you know, you start to discover more and more ways that you connect more and more to a larger system and can have broader impact the more you stay values-based in your work and dedicated to the work that you're doing. And I think that's something that I really feel excited about since I've come into this leadership role, an executive leadership role at this level. You know, I was thinking as Dr. Ross was talking about the terms that we've evolved our what we would call our equity work, from multiculturalism to diversity work to equity or equality to inclusion, and now equity. And Ben mentioned it in the intro, but the work that I'm really trying to achieve now is aspirational, as it has always been, but to really establish an anti-racist college. And I think that what Dr. Ross said at the end of your remarks about bloom where you're planted, when I realized I really did want to stay in community colleges and in education, I think that was a moment I really understood that phrase, to bloom where I'm planted, to make change where I am. And I think about what I talk about with my college as an invitation to participate in anti-racist work and into evolve our college into an anti-racist organization. I think I'm asking them to bloom where they're planted as well. Everybody is bringing in different pieces of change that they want to make on behalf of their students, on behalf of their world of work, on behalf of their community. And more than anything, I intend for that charge to be an invitation to figure out how to systematize change, how to go from the personal to the professional development to the system change that we really need to all be contributing to, because I believe that that's how we're going to build momentum much more quickly than we have towards racial equity than we've been able to in past decades of just trying to nibble around the edges of multiculturalism and just diversity efforts. And so with that, I guess I'll leave you all with that invitation as well, whether you identify your work in public service as being a part of anti-racist solution and evolution or not. I am asking that anyone that's working in public service is doing so with the intentionality that you are doing it to create racial equity, to end racial inequity, because anything that compels you on a values basis to serve the people of our region, of our nation, whatever that may be, it's got to be grounded, as I believe, as Dr. Ross was also saying, in a desire and an affection for all peoples, and especially around those who have been underserved, who've been excluded, and who have been systemically harmed by the systems that we are trying to lead in today. So with that, I just want to again reiterate how grateful I am to receive this award, to be recognized, to Ben for the nomination and the very generous introduction, and to ASPA for recognizing folks in their fields in the various sectors that public service represents. And to those of you who may be students or recent alums, I wish you the best of luck in your career. You're doing the absolute right thing, and we need each and every one of you. So thank you very, very much for this honor.
Wonderful, congratulations. We're so thrilled that you accepted our award. We'll now go to our next award.
So I'm honored to read the award for the advancement of collaborative governance. And so this increasingly disruptive approach to political decision-making has increased significantly since the early 1990s, reaching its most intensive level in the past few years. As a result, we've seen deadlocks in government at all levels, resulting in decreasing the effectiveness of governance. During the same period of time, a new form of government decision-making has emerged, one that involves not only the responsible government agencies, but many other stakeholders. This approach is growing quickly, but has not yet become a standard practice. This award honors organizations or individuals who have effectively promoted and engaged in this governance process, providing leadership for a program that is inclusive rather than exclusive, that resolves the differences held by stakeholders and results in sustainable outcomes.
It is my pleasure to introduce our award winner for the Collaborative Governance Award. Jenny Six has demonstrated a commitment to finding ways to bring people and organizations together to solve public problems. With experience working in government and for consulting firms, Jenny recognized early in her career that governments rely on businesses for critical goods and services and often struggle to figure out how to structure those relationships effectively. Along the way, Jenny has demonstrated a commitment to ensuring efficient use of public funds while protecting critical processes designed to preserve equity in our public programs. I first met Jenny at the Evans School, where she's a student in our Masters of Public Administration program. In her 2 years, she left an indelible mark on the school and the Seattle community. Jenny spearheaded the founding of the Evans School's Community Action Team, confronting an institution struggling with weaving diversity, equity, and inclusion into its curriculum, and trying to figure out how to talk about and address issues of racism, sexism, and other forms of systematized discrimination. Jenny helped to create a group of students to analyze the problem and serve as experts to support faculty inquiries. The Community Action Team held monthly meetings with faculty for 2 years, identifying areas where the school could improve and offering input on teaching priorities and cases. In essence, even during school, Jenny was helping build collaborative processes to ensure that faculty and students communicated effectively about the classroom experience. And while she was balancing these other duties, along with serving as a teaching and research assistant in our program, Jenny maintained her commitment to advancing the practical side of collaborative governance. In her first year, Jenny served as a research analyst on a project that I had with the Seattle Department of Transportation, researching the zoning for robotic technologies and public rights of way. Her work has been influential in the development of new right-of-way policies in Seattle. In her second year, Jenny interned as an analyst for the Seattle Department of Finance and Administrative Services, researching and crafting a new sustainable procurement ordinance for the city. She led a research team tasked with reviewing sustainable purchasing ordinances and policies across the US and major cities in Asia and Europe, and ultimately drafted the new sustainable procurement ordinance for the city. Jenny now works as a senior consultant at Kinetic West, a startup social impact consulting firm. There, she's working to bring together partners from across the education, career-connected learning, economic development, and human capital sectors to improve public services and offer strategic support to public organizations. For her lasting commitment to finding ways to bring together public servants, those they serve, and their suppliers, I'm honored today to present Jenny Six with ASPA Evergreen's Advancement of Collaborative Governance Award.
Wow, thank you. I am so honored and humbled to receive this recognition and to see my name on the same event program as so many amazing leaders. Each of the efforts that Ben mentioned was very much a team effort, whether it was team projects or partners intentionally building on each other's work, always aiming to honor work done prior, elevate knowledge, not just in numbers, but in storytelling and other types of wisdom, and to push each other to stay focused on who our work is intended to serve. And that has been my experience in pursuing collaborative governance. Teams focused on shared public service goals, grounded in shared values, and then pursuing those goals through all kinds of channels, mechanisms, collaboration, and challenges. In particular, I want to thank Sharmila Ajmira, Andrea Sheikh, Stephanie Boudris, and Anna Kelsey, who are frequent teammates, thought partners, colleagues, and people who challenge me in the best ways. And also a thank you to the student organizers from Evans cohorts prior to mine, who set the stage for the work we were able to do during my time there and have hugely informed how I approach this work in all parts of my life. Today's recognition is humbling and it is also motivating. I'm already feeling all kinds of energy and ideas bubbling to continue pursuing opportunities to move forward together because there is a lot of work to do. Thank you, ASPA. Thank you, Ben, for nominating me, and congrats to my fellow award recipients. Thank you very much.
Congratulations. I know I'm inspired by everyone who is on the program today. So thank you for your excellence in public administration. I will now move to Mary to introduce our final award.
Thank you, Nicole. For our fourth and final award today, which is the Call to Service Award, I'd like to re-invite J. Paul Blake to the virtual stage to introduce our award winner.
Thanks again, Mary. And it's indeed an honor for me to introduce the recipient of the Call to Service Award. The award honors those who have demonstrated a devotion to public service, either as a practitioner, as an academic who teaches and encourages students to enter public service, or any other individual who appreciates the value of public service and provides support and encouragement so the best among us will follow this career path. I nominated Alejandra Tress, the recipient of the Call to Service Award, because she exemplifies the best of what the award is all about. I was a member of the Municipal League of King County's Board of Directors when Alejandra became the organization's executive director in 2013. She held that role until 2019. Established in 1910, the Municipal League is a member-driven, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization with a mission to promote government that is open, effective, and accountable, and to improve the caliber of public officials and the quality of public decisions. During her tenure, Alejandra developed and implemented initiatives that attracted new donors and funding sources to the League, The organization's budget tripled under her leadership. The League's Civic Awards program, a key element of the organization's public outreach, was revised by Alejandra, who co-created ReadySetVote.org, the League's locally and nationally recognized civic tool that makes voting easy and fun. Alejandra managed the process to modernize and streamline the League's organizational functions. She enhanced efforts to collaborate with other community organizations, including the Latino Community Fund. Alejandra's focus on the League's commitment to social equity as an element of good governance resulted in an expanded board, including leaders from different age, class, gender, racial, geographic backgrounds, and perspectives. Acknowledging Alejandra's resignation, the League's board chair wrote, quote, "We cannot thank Alejandra enough for the dedication, passion, enthusiasm, and motivation she brought to the Municipal League and our community. She will be greatly missed by the staff, board, members, and our partners." Alejandra's commitment to good governance and public service was further demonstrated by her creation of the Battle for Democracy Fund, which works to energize voters to help combat voter suppression and impact voter turnout. I'm very pleased to see the Evergreen chapter of ASPA honor my friend Alejandra's commitment to the public good, social equity, and informed citizenry and effective government. Congratulations, Alejandra. We welcome your remarks.
Thank you so much, J. Paul. It's actually the fact that you nominated me that makes this award just really, really special. As a matter of fact, it's actually this joy, I feel like, when we come together and connect with others interested in building common ground and tangible change, that draws us and actually keeps us engaged in this work. It's actually the connections I have with J. Paul and with so many other excellent leaders that sustain us, keep us laughing, frankly, sometimes crying together. When I ran the Municipal League, we used to build these connections into our gala. We would stop mid-award announcements and remind people that it is these connections that we have that inspire leaders that we were celebrating that day. So we would pause in the middle of a gala, which almost never happens, and we would ask everyone to purposefully find someone they might normally connect with or maybe even disagree with. Sometimes we would say, you know, if you're a Seahawk fan, find a 49ers fan, if that's where you want to go. But we would ask them to find someone they don't talk to and compel them to discuss something where they can find common ground. You know, always the room becomes a buzz, and people always tell me it was the most memorable part of the gala season. And, you know, as J. Paul mentioned, you know, our civic awards became more and more, you know, had more and more different people from different backgrounds every year. And this was always the highlight, was the connecting. You know, ASPA is also one of these important places of connection, and one of these critical spaces that Dr. Ross outlined as a place to move along the equity investment spectrum. I think we actually underestimate the power of connection to transform, and I've been finding this more and more in the Get Out the Vote work I've done in the Battle for Democracy Fund, working largely with African-American churches and Latino communities around not just stamping down suppression, but depression, just the very pieces that keep us from voting. And what keeps us all going in that really hard work is this joy of connection. In one instance, we, and as Jenny said, it's always a very big we that brings about, you know, even these slate of honorees. I feel like this is celebrating everyone who's ever worked with me. But this one time we organized Latino youth to do a Get Out the Vote effort. They designed everything. This is what it starts with, right? And they did that by having conversations that we call listening seasons, and to see exactly what they wanted it to look like, not what it needed to look like. And in the end, it ended up really looking like a party. There was a lot of tamales, there was Coke. It was just so much fun that after they organized the first one, the youth actually did a sit-in and said they refused to leave the church until we promised to take them to the next callback, saying it was actually more fun than playing video games. So that is the power of connection and the power that you all bring here in this amazing group and these honorees. And I hope this will stay with me. I'm so grateful and honored and humbled. And my wish for you is that you all have powerful connections that spur you on this important work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and congratulations, Alejandra, Shayla, Rosie, and Jenny. We are just so pleased that we could honor you here today. That brings us to the end of our program. Thank you. I know we're a little bit over time, but thank you for staying with us. It's important that we got to honor all of our award winners, and Alan Rosenbaum and Dr. Terryl Ross. Thank you so much for joining us. For our members and board members, thank you for being here. We hope you will stay in touch. We have some exciting programming coming up later this summer and this fall. So please keep in touch on our website, on LinkedIn. We have a group, and there's also a group on Facebook. I encourage you to join in, and congratulations again to all, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you all again. Have a wonderful weekend.